Okay, everyone. So thanks for joining us. This is our August monthly meetup, College to Climate. I know all of you are probably already familiar with what we do, but just in case, we're a community focused on building connections for college students looking to work in climate. And we do this by offering several different programs, including this monthly meetup, but also our coffee chats and other outreach programs with climate employers. And like we were just talking about, this is just for you, just a space for you to connect with like-minded people and find your path within climate. And so today we have the pleasure to have Noah here. Uh, I'll let him introduce himself, but uh, happy just wanted to point out, just feel free to put any questions you have on the chat. Or you could also just save them for later and we'll have time for Q&A, so you can just raise your hand and unmute, whatever feels more comfortable. And yeah, I'll just pass it on to Noah. Again, thanks everyone for coming.
Yeah, thanks, Lucas. Thank you all for having me here. Definitely really excited to be here and super stoked about College to Climate and what you all are doing. But yeah, let me just share my screen real quick and we can get started. All right, does everyone see this?
Yes.
Sweet. Yeah, so I'm Noah. I am a software engineer at Muir AI in Seattle. And I wanted to just share a bit about my experience. Hopefully that can help some of you and discuss what I'm thinking of as a sustainability mindset. And here actually in the background is a picture in Western Washington off of Mount Rainier when I was skiing last year. And you'll see a few more of these pictures. I'm a huge outdoors person and there's hopefully a lot of fun pictures in here as well. But yeah, let's just get started. So just at a high level, what I kind of wanted to talk about here, I'm just going to walk through some of the topics here. So the first thing I wanted to discuss was and explore was why, like, did I even choose to work in climate? And I think this is a pretty valid question. And there's a chance that a lot of you already know the answer to this if you're here, but I think it's worth exploring. And then I'll look into how I was thinking about climate tech and my career in college, and then ultimately how I got to Muir AI and what we're actually doing at Muir. And then looking forwards, I wanted to provide some insights that I had and some opportunities for hope. So yeah, just why climate? Like honestly, climate change is depressing. It's like very people get bombarded with, all this depressing news all the time. The world is changing, and I do think that a lot of people end up feeling like this. This is my cat when he was a kitten, Goose. I threw a t-shirt across the room and he freaked out and was super scared. And I think generally like all of us feel like this, and this has been a motivating factor for me for sure, existential dread, feeling like there's a chance, what if we're not here in 50, 100 years, that's terrifying. And while I think that's absolutely valid, I think there's also for me a lot of hope within climate change. There's a lot of opportunity for growth. There's a lot of things that we can do, a lot of technologies that we can discover. And ultimately, too, since I love being outside so much and I love being just, playing sports outside, hiking, skiing, backpacking, I'm definitely strongly motivated by the outdoors and just the beauty of our world. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be, a national park or like wilderness. Like just walking outside through the city, there's so many amazing things you can see. And I think these things have come together to really motivate me to want to help and want to be involved in climate. So, kind of some context on me. Growing up, I really enjoyed building things, being outside, and music. Uh, Pretty much throughout my whole childhood, those three things is all that I did. When I actually got to college, I ultimately focused on those three things, which is a bit broad for college, right? And you could say even that I would kind of tried a little bit of everything, but was not particularly good at anything. And probably spread myself a little bit too thin. But I think the core idea that I had was I really wanted to prioritize breadth of learning and keeping climate as something that I was learning about and focusing on, but also generally just trying to develop as many people skills as I could, as many technical skills within computer science as I could. Uh, this is something that I think ultimately has helped me, but it's not necessarily how everybody should do it. It's worked for me. Um, and yeah, so I think throughout college, I've always wanted to work in climate. And so I focused on a lot of projects outside of school that were focused on climate tech, and that ultimately helped me as well. But prioritizing this breadth of learning, I think, carried into the first part of my career. I'm still in pretty much the first part of my career, but that ultimately led me to Expedia Group. And I actually had the opportunity to be part of a rotational program at Expedia Group for about a year. What was unique about this was being able to be on two different teams. And I think a lot of companies may not necessarily have this, depending on what industry you're in. But at the very least, I was able to try to prioritize having this breadth of learning. And so the first team that I was on focused on taking in all of the traffic for Expedia Group sites. And then the second team I had was totally different. It was building out user experiences for changing your flights or canceling your flights. And so kind of this breadth of opportunity uh, definitely helped me to like improve my overall technical skills across different disciplines within computer science and programming. And it also improved my design skills and interpersonal skills. I think one key thing here, and this is something that I really want to impart on you all, is there throughout my time in college and at Expedia, I've always tried to like maintain a sustainability mindset. And so that meant even though my day job was like, I'm selling flights to people, like that's not, it's inherently not sustainable to fly, right? But ultimately, having the opportunity then outside of that job to then focus on sustainability is something that I tried to do. And so I ended up getting involved with the company sustainability group at Expedia and leading a few events and working with a couple different offices across the globe. And it ended up being a really awesome experience and ended up being impactful. We were able to donate like hundreds of pounds of clothing to local charities every quarter. We had like a bunch of different outreach programs, and we actually had a lot of people coming to those events. And so that was something that was really enjoyable. That wasn't directly related to my like what I was hired to do, but I think it ultimately helped me just feel like I was having an impact, but also helped to pad my resume in some ways to be able to then move into climate tech more directly later on. And so that's ultimately what I did. I moved on to Muir AI, and this was only 6 months ago. So I'm only 2 years out of college. So to some extent, take everything with a grain of salt. But I kind of just applied on a whim. One of my friends sent me a job listing on LinkedIn, and I was like, "Oh, what? Okay, sure, let's just do it. Why not? This looks like it's right up my alley." I wasn't really planning on leaving Expedia for another year or two. I still had a lot to learn, but I was like, "Screw it, let's try it." And ultimately found myself getting an interview, and suddenly I was there. And I think some things that really helped me throughout this process were, I mean, first of all, passion for the subject. And I think this applies to all, whatever job that you're in. Companies want to see that you're passionate about things and passionate about what they're doing. And I think this is especially weighted highly in climate and other like more mission-oriented fields. And I think this just showing that excitement and not just like talking about, oh, I love this and this and this, but also demonstrating that, I worked on these projects and they didn't have to be climate related projects, but I made them climate related projects. And that helped definitely to improve my chances. Um, I do think to some extent, like this is very lucky of me. Like I got super lucky. I applied at the right time, and there are a lot of other factors that were outside of my control. And unfortunately, I think that that's the reality of a lot of these things is you could be super qualified and just not get it. But I think the more that you're able to increase your luck, the better off you are. And I think just generally another point here, and this applies not just to climate, but really make sure that you're interviewing the company as much as they're interviewing you. Really understand like who am I going to be working with? Who am I working for? Like I think those are really important questions, and especially now when it's kind of harder to come by jobs with the current economy, like it it like it can be hard to say, oh, I am interviewing them. But I think it's a really important thing to keep in mind. And it definitely helped me when I was interviewing for Muir. So speaking of Muir, let me just show you a little bit about what we're actually doing and what I'm doing here. So we're trying to give companies the ability to model their entire supply chain and reduce emissions across the board. So, but specifically what we focus on is we take in a product and a set of inputs, and then we're able to break that product down into its materials and subcomponents, and then estimate the emissions at every single step of the supply chain. And so my role specifically is more focused on the application side, less so the AI side. And so my role has been to basically build out the database infrastructure and web application supporting our customers who are then using our core model. And so here's some examples that I've pasted in here of what our product looks like today. And, in this example, we take in a pair of Bluetooth headphones and, the supplier, where it's coming from, and then where it's going. And we are able then to break it into a bunch of materials and estimate the overall emissions and then the intensity, which is the emissions per kilogram. We also have a unique opportunity to be able to identify the cost as well, so that we can bring a little bit more business value into into the company's decisions when they're making these sourcing decisions. You can see that our model goes into pretty deep detail. Like this is the material breakout of a set of Bluetooth headphones. And you can see we have a lot of, especially in electronics, but we have a lot of materials that we've identified that go into this and the estimated emissions at every single step. And we do the same thing for materials and cost. Here's a few more things too that, so I think one key thing that our platform does that very few software platforms will do in climate and like carbon accounting, for example, is that a lot of people will just measure the emissions of what a company is emitting. For us, we actually go a step further and we're trying to identify exactly where you can reduce your emissions. So that's what you can see here in the reduction section, is that our model has the ability to then go based on the assumptions that we've made and the data that you've given us. We're able to go and actually figure out, hey, if you switch to renewable energy at this supplier, you're probably going to reduce emissions like by a lot. Or maybe if you change up the materials in this one piece of your product, that'll actually help a lot. And so that is something that we think is key to like achieving reductions. And so you can see here, like we provide a bunch of different metrics that are helpful. And then the last piece here is we're able to also identify the likely sourcing areas and sourcing countries for your like materials. So here you can see like all these materials are sourced from certain countries, and our map will display that. And there are a couple other things our platform does, but this is essentially high level. And yeah, I'll tell you a bit more. We have an opportunity for a fall internship, and I can tell you more about that later, but definitely follow along. Follow us on LinkedIn and we'll have more updates for you. So finally, just moving into some of the key takeaways that I feel like I've found over my short career, and specifically with climate. I think spending extra time throughout college and also at Expedia Group, really devoting myself to learning about climate and building up my technical skills definitely helped to improve my chances. It was able to show, I was able to show that passion when I was interviewing. And for every single project that I've done where I had the chance, I've included climate in that. So pretty much everything that I'm thinking about is like that sustainability mindset. And I think that ultimately is what got me the job. I may not have been the best qualified technical candidate, but I think that just my passion absolutely helped. I think also tailoring your application for the specific job and writing a unique cover letter is especially helpful if there's like a good fit for you. If you think, hey, this looks amazing and it looks like I fit the requirements pretty well, I think it's worth taking the extra time. I know maybe some of you are in this boat, but in college, I applied to, I don't know, 200 different positions for an internship and just threw my resume out. But the one that actually stuck was one where I actually was intentional about, hey, looks like I meet the requirements. I'm going to tailor my resume to this job and I'm going to write a unique cover letter. And that is what I did from Muir, and that I think helped. I also think some general advice that I've seen in my short career is thinking critically about what needs to be done rather than just what you want. I think will help show employers that you're just willing to go for it and do whatever you need to do or whatever they need to do. And yeah, I think in general, like definitely focusing on and identifying where can things be improved? What are other people missing that I can maybe step in and help with? What is something that nobody else wants to do, but maybe it needs to get done. If you go that extra mile, your employers will love you. A few more takeaways here. Um, I got lucky. I found a great opportunity very quickly out of school. That may not be the case for you, but that's okay. I really strongly believe if you maintain this sustainability mindset, um, even if your job does not have anything to do directly with climate, I think that's a great thing. We need people across all verticals and industries constantly thinking about climate, doing things about climate. Maybe the highest impact role is actually working at an oil company. I don't know. Like maybe you're able to like there's a lot of things that you can do at companies that are not specific to climate. I also think building up a breadth of technical and or people skills, it's building up these other non-climate related skills will go a long way. A lot of these climate companies, like ultimately my company, we're like a software company. And so building up those technical skills and then for our salespeople building up their, marketing skills, those are great skills that are applicable to a lot of domains, but have gone a really long way in helping us out. So finally, I wanted to share a few statistics that I learned somewhat recently, actually. I attended during Seattle Tech Week. Silicon Valley Bank had a presentation on climate tech, and they did some analysis on the market and the venture capital side of things. And yeah, there's some pretty like interesting findings. I think something that everyone struggles with in climate is, companies pretty much only care about their bottom lines and nothing else. And unfortunately, I do think that's for the most part true. That being said, I do think climate change is a financial issue and it's becoming an even more pressing financial issue to the extent where, in 2024, 66% of Fortune 500 companies already had plans to mitigate climate change's effects. And that's something that's changed drastically in the past few years. And I think that reflects that there's going to be a lot of opportunity in the climate tech. There's also a drawdown in VC investment across all tech, as I'm sure many of you are aware. Um, that being said, what was fascinating was climate tech actually was far outperforming general tech. And actually 11% of deals in 2024 were meant to fund climate tech companies. So long story short, the idea is I believe that there will be many more climate job opportunities. And so if you don't get your dream opportunity now, there are going to be more opportunities down the line. And climate change ultimately is sticky. It's a problem we're going to be dealing with for our lives. So it's not going to disappear overnight. I wish I did, but there's going to be opportunities for you to get involved. And I think just to leave you on this note, like the world sucks sometimes. Like there's a lot of really terrible stuff out there. Climate change is scary. That's okay. I firmly believe that climate change is a solvable problem, and we're actually already on the path towards solving. And I think more so than we realize. There's a lot of negative stuff out there, but there's also a lot of positive stuff out there. And I just wanted to like commend you all for being here and listening and being involved in like meeting other people in climate. And I think just by being here and considering a career in climate, you're doing amazing. So pat yourself on the back for that because that's great. And the last thing, take some time for yourself. Go for a walk, ride a bike, go for a hike. Take some time, enjoy your life. Like there's a lot of stressful stuff out there. And if you're involved in this, like that's great. That's enough. Go hang out for a bit. But anyways, thank you so much for having me here. And hopefully some of these key takeaways were helpful, but definitely interested in hearing some more questions. Here are some QR codes if you're interested in connecting with me on LinkedIn on the left. In the middle, you can follow my company Muir on LinkedIn as well. And then we actually have an internship opportunity opening up for this fall. We're relatively flexible, but there's the application form there if you're interested. Thank you so much for having me.
Let's give Noah a virtual clap of hands. I'll give you a physical clap of hands too. That was awesome, Noah. Uh, so before we jump into Q&A, just thank you for sharing all this. I think we can now relate to feeling passionate about climate change and understanding that there's definitely opportunity. It's just hard to see sometimes, especially what you mentioned at the end. It can be stressful, just finding those opportunities. So really glad to have you speak here. And for the rest of the time here, we'll just have open Q&A. So as I said, you can feel free to raise your hand on Zoom and just unmute. You can also send them on the chat and I could read them out, whatever feels most comfortable. Any questions? Great
No,
time.
I just wanted to like underscore, I think what you said about how companies are looking for students to be really aligned with the mission. That's super important. And it's something we try to preach from the hilltops all the time because we've heard that directly from climate companies. And I can say that as well for my company that I work with. I work at Redwood Climate Communications. It's a PR agency. Work with climate tech and environmental nonprofits, and we hire largely based on how committed you are based on, right, like what have you been doing over the past year that might be related? So another thing I really wanted to emphasize too that you said was having projects. And that's something else that we really like to emphasize, a climate specific project that you can showcase or, talk about in an interview. It takes you so far because when the work gets boring, they know that you're still so committed to the mission and they know they're going to be right dedicated to your work. So I just wanted to emphasize those things. I thought that was really awesome that you included those points.
Couldn't agree more with that. Projects. And
Yeah, I guess the question would be like, do you have maybe examples of a project that could be, like ideas for students maybe that they could. But Lucas, did you have a question too? Maybe that was similar or
I want to hear
related?
that answer first. That's a
Yeah,
great
yeah.
question.
Okay.
Sure. I mean, I don't know. Like there are a bunch of different things. There's always stuff that you probably could to think about and work on. I mean, one example is something that I did in this is when I pretty much had zero technical knowledge and zero technical abilities in college was I thought it'd be fascinating if we could passively track the carbon emissions of someone while they're driving. And so I just kind of learned, and with a few other people, we tried to build an app that would pull from the EPA government website and figure out how much a car emits on average per mile, and then use Apple's like built-in mileage tracker to then track the emissions. And that was just kind of a fun exercise, and not necessarily something I don't feel like a lot of people don't necessarily want to see. Oh, geez, I just emitted like 16 kilograms CO2e, but like, so the market maybe wasn't there, but it was a really fun exercise and just what like building my technical skills and also thinking about a climate problem. And I think there are multiple examples of that. Off the top of my head, like, yeah, I don't know. There's some like optimizations you can do. There's infrastructure related things. One of the projects I worked on was related to how do you optimize like a commute? Like say you're carpooling with four other people, how do you optimize like picking up people in the right pattern to like reduce emissions? I don't know. There's a bunch of different things that you can do. Yeah, I don't know if that fully answers your question, but um, there are a bunch of things, I think.
It does. I would second that. And my question for you, Noah, is you mentioned about the importance of interviewing your interviewers as well while you're applying for a job. How did you interview Muir when you applied?
Yeah, great
Questions
question.
did you ask?
Great question. I think one of the big questions and one of the big things that I just try to get a feel for is, how do these people deal with conflict? So I asked the CTO of the company, like, what happens if you have a deadline then tomorrow and you and the CEO have really different opinions about what should be done? And um, obviously, you're not going to get the full picture of exactly what they would do unless that actually happens. But you can kind of get a sense of, oh, like we're going to figure it out, or oh, he'll just decide, and I'll just go with whatever he says, or you can kind of get an idea of how they actually communicate. And I think also just trying to understand their actual expectations of you can help too. Um, but generally, I try to ask a lot of questions around, how do you interact with people? What's your like leadership style? What's your philosophy on like leading people? And I think that usually people will be pretty honest with you about that, and you'll have a better understanding of what it's like. I do think also it helps that I interviewed in person, and I was able to go, and they brought me in for 4 hours here in Seattle in person, and it was a little intense, but also I literally just you were able to see a lot and be able to talk to them face to face, and I think that can help.
That's really helpful, actually. I'm taking notes for myself too here.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, cool. I saw Christina first, and then we'll go with Josh.
Um, as I am making resumes to send out and attach to, applications, have you found having like a one-page, one-sided resume um, get more feedback as opposed to, say, a five-page one where you're literally including every single possible thing that you could on it from, the time you started like your paper route or working at the corner store to, going through school and the skills you learn there to, your last job?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I'd say generally one page, keep it one page. I'm not an expert, like maybe multiple pages will work, and it's nice to, if you have a lot of like breadth of experience that you think would be helpful for an application, go for it. But I think generally speaking, one page definitely makes the most sense. And maybe you can only display three or four of your like core like experiences or two even. But I think if you're able to tailor those experiences to what the job is and what the requirements are, that will go much further than providing everything. And ultimately, a lot of these people, like a lot of people that are hiring, don't have the time to go through and read your resume like that. Like they'll just want to be able to see the top few things and then be like, oh, okay, do they have the experience we're looking for? Do they not? And if it's too long, they may just not even bother. So I think that keeping it one page is usually the best call.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Definitely want to just put an exclamation point on that. We definitely encourage one page, and I'd say like another fun tip too when it comes to resumes, right, is like, can you quantify your impact that you had at that role? So if it is a relevant role and you are, it would include transferable skills that you would use at the role that you're applying, definitely include it, try to fit it into one page. And then if you can like quantify like the actual impact that you had, maybe, you developed 3 to 5 new, donor relationships or like something like that that can help them visualize things, that can be really impactful. I just know that when I'm reviewing resumes for my company, that's something we look for. But then I also just want to add, right, showcasing climate passion is always really helpful for these things as well. Sorry, I just wanted to piggyback a little bit.
I definitely agree with that. And you all at College of Climate probably have more experience. Some of you probably have more experience looking at resumes than I do, even. So definitely, definitely good.
Go for it, Josh.
Okay, cool. So one of your key takeaways now was that you spent a good bit of time learning more about technical skills and also about climate. What resources did you use to learn more, especially on the climate side?
On the climate side, yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, I think a lot of my knowledge honestly comes from reading the news, which is maybe not the most like inspiring way to have find knowledge, but a lot of the time I'll just pick a topic. Like for example, this month I've been really interested in forestry. And so I'll just pick a topic and kind of whenever I feel like it, just go down a rabbit hole on either YouTube or Wikipedia or like other sources too. And that can kind of like just broaden your knowledge about a certain area if you want to go in depth. Um, like I think, yeah, generally too, if you have the opportunity to take courses, that also helps a lot. If you're in school and have the opportunity to take more environmental courses, like they're going to be things that you're going to learn. I'd say, yeah, just taking advantage of the internet. Like the internet has so much information, and now especially with AI using ChatGPT, definitely there's going to be a lot of topics that you can learn about. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think on the topic of technical versus I'll call them climate skills. Um, I know you touched on this already too, but how would you advise a student who's trying to decide if they should focus more time on learning their technical skills? So if you're computer science, learning a new programming language or getting familiar with some sort of technology versus focusing on that passion, climate knowledge that shows how much you know about this industry.
Yeah, that's a good question. And honestly, I don't know if I have a good answer. I mean, the first answer I had in my head was, oh, just try to do both if you can. But obviously, that's not necessarily practical. Um, I think that's a hard one because it does depend on what you ultimately want to do. For me, what worked was focusing a lot on those technical skills. Like those are skills that are maybe a little bit more difficult to develop on your own, depending on how deep you go. And if you're in school and you have the opportunity to focus on those technical skills, I would definitely go pretty deep into that just to like build out that breadth of skills. And then you can apply those skills to climate more directly. That's generally how I would think about it, but I don't know if that's necessarily the right way to go about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I do think. Go for it, Sydney.
Yeah, so I'm like a recent graduate and I work in environmental consulting, and I'm curious, kind of, I have more of a technical question about kind of the role of AI in like the sustainability world, because like I know like a lot of companies are like heavily dependent on tracking things through spreadsheets and things like that. Like it's a lot of companies don't have efficient ways to report on sustainability, let alone environmental compliance. So I'm wondering like if you have advice for like where you think people can like upskill and make sure they're ready for AI and how it's impacting the workforce. Because when I was in college very recently, a lot of sustainability professionals told us you need to become familiar with AI if you like want to be like relevant in the sustainability future. So I guess it's kind of like a broad question slash discussion of like how can we be ready for AI and like where is it going, I guess.
Yeah, great question. And I think that, AI is going to disrupt the world. It already has started to disrupt the world, but it's going to be massively disruptive. There are definitely parts of it that are overhyped. There's definitely people out there that are scamming people with AI and like, but it is going to disrupt the way that we work, and it already has. Um, I'd say what your sustainability professional said, use it, try to learn a little bit how it works, and just definitely use it in your job. It makes you so much more efficient. Just in my job as a developer, like I do think it's improved my efficiency by like 40%, which is crazy. Um, yeah, but I think yeah, beyond that, like just using it and like continuing to build out interpersonal skills also is a big thing, because that's something that AI cannot do and probably will never be able to do, is how do you work with other people? Maybe it's something far down the line that it can do, but in the near future, I think, having those high level design skills, if you're in a technical role, or if you're in more of a person like a people role, being able to build relationships with people and being able to understand people, I think that could go a really far way in helping you stay ahead of that.
I think one kind of like exercise too, right, is to think about like the different sectors of climate tech, maybe that you're particularly interested in. And then thinking about and researching and just doing a little bit of understanding of how AI is being applied if you are super new to understanding, right, like AI applications. It sounds like Sydney, you might have already kind of done that. Definitely carbon accounting, carbon management sectors. Those like there are carbon accounting platforms popping up left and right. But AI is being deployed across the grid, to optimize energy loss or to find opportunities to onboard or on take more renewables. There's AI being, in just normal everyday like marketing roles. There's ways to apply AI to probably every single role that you might ever consider applying for. So just always keep that right in the back of your mind. Maybe do a little bit of research when you think of it. I think that can take you a long way, even in an interview, being able to talk about, that you have awareness about the different ways that AI is being deployed and the different outcomes. I think it can be really good context to have for conversations in climate tech for sure.
Yeah. Christina?
So I was just wondering, in the time you've been working with climate related companies or projects, have you found you've gotten a lot of pushback from any one, I guess, organization, or I would have to say like government, like group or entity? And the reason I ask that is because I'm focusing on going into the government to make changes from like the inside on rules and policies and how things are evaluated and upheld. So I'm just wondering if you've seen anything from like what you have done so far.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, honestly, when we think about regulation at Muir, we're not reliant on it, but it provides a tailwind for a business. Like if the government comes out with more regulations where companies have to report more emissions, then it's going to help our business. Um, and so like in terms of actual blockers from the government, I don't know. One thing that does come to mind though is we've been building out functionality to allow our customers to report their emissions to the European Commission. So the European Commission recently came out with CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, which requires companies that are importing like high emitting materials to then in the future pay a tariff on it, but for now, just identify the emissions that are associated with those materials. And companies are freaking out about it because they don't know how to get data from their suppliers. And I think like generally like those regulatory regulations necessary. Regulation is going to be something we need. But I've found like having like gone through that spreadsheet, which is 10 like sheets long, and like having to parse through all the data and figure out, how are we going to ingest data from suppliers? I think thinking about how we can make it as streamlined as possible so that companies are able to do it instead of, for example, one of the companies that we were working with was basically like, yeah, we want to think more about this and whether it just makes sense to just pay the tariff instead of having to deal with this. And so they're not going to make any changes. And so finding that balance, I think, is challenging. Um, so I don't know if that fully answers your question, but that's been kind of my experience and brush with government regulation. Yeah.
It does. Thank you.
Yeah.
Noah, so we got a question on the chat, and
Yeah.
it's about how do you see uh, climate roles within big tech versus climate tech? So maybe going back to your experience at Expedia, how did you see the hiring strategies there versus hiring strategies at Muir?
I think also just to clarify too, Lucas, it sounds like the question, I think that's really interesting. I think you should definitely answer that question specific to just big tech, but also like there is a nuance too between climate tech startups and climate big tech, right? So I think that, and that might have been what Anurag was mentioning. So I just wanted to make sure that we captured that accurately, but please continue. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great point, Jess. Like I think, yeah, like my experience is pretty skewed because I went from big tech, traditional company to tiny startup, also in climate tech. And so we're comparing, like, if we're comparing big tech to startups, I think that's probably where I can speak to the most because I don't have the experience at a big climate company. But generally speaking, like, a startup in general, there's a lot more, or sorry, a lot less red tape, a lot of opportunities to just go and, oh, we need to build this now. We're going to have to build it in a week. Let's just do it now. Okay, do it. Like it's very fast moving. Like at Expedia, we built a feature that was great, and we built it pretty quickly in like 4 months. That same feature we probably build within 2 weeks here at my startup, just because there are fewer people, there's less red tape, and we also have fewer customers. Like we have much fewer customers than Expedia, who has billions of requests on their website every day. So I think those are like some of the big things I noticed. I think another thing, big tech will have more structure in how they do everything. There's unit tests and code. There's like really flushed out, like, oh, we're supposed to do things this way. There's process that's been set up. At startups, that's not necessarily there. Maybe it is there, but it's just not fully flushed out yet. And so there are advantages and disadvantages to both. At big tech, like you're probably not going to take the entire website down or delete a bunch of data accidentally because there are a bunch of protections in place. Versus at a startup, that's way more likely. And so in terms of actual hiring strategies, though, I would say that startups, big tech, they tend to, you interview kind of random people throughout the company, and then you maybe join a team, and that's the team. Maybe you didn't even meet your manager before. At startups, you're going to meet your manager. You're going to meet all the people that you're working with directly. And I actually like that a little bit better just for me, because then you have the opportunity to actually meet the team that you're working on. In big tech, that also happens, but I think generally big tech has, just like with how work happens between big tech and startups, big tech has more of a formalized process in how they're hiring, versus startups will be very quick. And the second they say, oh, this is someone we want, they'll just pull the trigger on it and say, yeah, we're going to take them. I don't think big tech will be a little bit more like slower and methodical. If that answers your question, I don't know. I could have them. You can have a follow up there if that didn't quite answer your question. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, so big tech would usually have hiring happen maybe around this season, 1 year before, whereas startups would be much more like on a rolling basis, usually spring semester. So that's a really good point there.
Yeah, one more thing that I'd add, definitely more sporadic timelines for hiring on the startup end. So always keeping your eyes out and being vigilant for new opportunities is so valid. And I would recommend that if you are interested in a startup, because it's definitely sporadic. However, I'd also say one thing I really like to let students and recent grads know is, and you probably already know this, but kind of want to emphasize it, is that startups often will have, right, they come with a little bit less security, maybe a little bit lower salaries and pay, less benefits. So those are sort of the trade-offs that you might find at startups where, you know, you're kind of making that compromise for a mission that you really believe in. And that trade-off also comes with, right, you get more responsibility, but usually you have a much like bigger voice in the company, right? Usually, like for example, I work at an agency with 9 people. I started as the second employee. So I've had a very big voice in the company, and it's been really incredible to be a part of that evolution and have such a big hand in what we've grown. So the trade-offs can be real. So for anybody who has a little bit less security, who, you know, maybe you have less of a, you know, sort of safety net and you want to move forward with more security, you want, you know, a reliable job with a higher paying salary with more benefits so you can start your 401k immediately, whatever your priorities are, that those are sort of the considerations I like to tell young people right out of college because it is a factor. But if you do have the flexibility to take a little bit more risk to work at a startup, it can turn out really well. And it can actually give you a leg up in your career because, like I said, you get to kind of take on more responsibility. It's likely you might move up more quickly in the company than you would at a big company with quite a few more employees.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think to add on top of that, even like in my experience, I worked at a big company for 2 years and financially that was really beneficial, right? It enabled me to go out and take a risk on a smaller company. And yeah, not everyone might be in that position, but yeah, starting in that big company, both from a financial but also a technical perspective too, learning how things are supposed to be done, getting my feet under me, like from a technical standpoint, I think that was super helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of using a non-climate job as a stepping stone to make your way into the climate job that you do prefer. It's not always that you get the dream job out of college that you want, but you have a great example of being able to strategically do that. And I think that that's really important for everyone to know because, like, you know, sometimes you just need to get a job. So it's okay to do that and then develop your skills and just stay true to your mission. That's why I think your sustainability mindset sort of core message is really beautiful.
Any other questions people might have?
Just a side note too, if anybody's interested in that SVB like slide deck that they had, I found it online and I can send it to the chat. It's super in depth if you want to like kind of look more closely at the analysis they've done on the markets for climate tech.
Yeah, that'd be great. Actually, it's like just right now it's the right time to get into the climate tech curve. So all of you just by being here, you're really ahead of the game, just um being exposed to all this information and these connections you're building, these people you're meeting in these meetups. That's really great that you all are doing this right now. Um,
We have a little bit of time left, and I'm wondering, is anyone currently applying for jobs? Are you going through your climate job search? And if so, do you want to share a little bit about like what that process has been like, or any questions more personal to you? Because we want to make sure that this is, of course, a value-packed session. We want you to get the most out of it. Or any other questions not related to yourself. Totally fine too.
yeah, Christina.
Okay, so I'm not applying for a climate position, but I have applied to sit on the board of the Parks and Recreation for my city. and I've also wildly applied to sit on the city council. Now, being a full-time college student and running against someone that's done this for, decades and decades, I am very hopeful, but I'm also very practical that, I don't think my community is going to choose a full-time college student over someone who has, been at this longer than I've been alive. But I figure at least it's a step in the right direction, getting to that point where my community is, instead of constantly destroying stuff and polluting stuff and making things worse, that we start taking action now, to save what we have, preserve what we have. It makes me think back to, since I'm currently taking a second history, US history, about how past presidents have set aside like massive chunks for state parks because they knew that all we did was just destroy stuff. And that if they didn't do that, it wouldn't be there for our future, for us to enjoy, and that's what I want to see from my area. So I just thought I would share that it's a huge undertaking. I feel like I'm going up against massive, like, I don't know, just like doubt, but I'm doing it. So, yeah.
Congratulations. That's incredible. Yeah,
Thank you.
that's really
Awesome.
amazing. I'd
We
love
applaud you
to
on your efforts.
actually, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I know I'm connected with JC Ark, who is the youngest city council member in LA. He's incredible, and he's actually organizing and running LA Climate Week. So that would be a really great person for you to connect with, just about, that whole process and experience. I'd be happy to make an intro for you. It's helpful.
And Christina, if you don't mind me asking, what are you studying in college?
I am currently studying political science.
Ah, I see.
But yes, every single year I participate in whatever my community has to offer, whether it's cleaning up the parks, cleaning up the roadways, some sort of beautification process, planting more trees. If you're going to build a road, plant 100 trees along it. If you need to dig this massive subdivision, plots and lots, if you're going to be knocking down 10 trees per one house, save some of those trees, save some of the bigger ones, and then if you have to clear the way, again, plant more trees, plant indigenous plants so they have that more likely of survivability when, as we go through, because Texas has its like own little weird hot climate, cold winters. So yeah. And then of course, the few parks that we do have here in Texas, and people go to them all the time, but we do leave such a massive impact, with people just walking through it, carrying all their garbage through it, making sure that they pick it up, that they recycle it, they don't let it get back into the environment, especially some of the harmful stuff. Yeah, and then of course on my campus I promote something where they have like zero carbon. Like we literally buy boxes, set them up, and you can put anything and everything in it and they will recycle it. So it doesn't matter whether it's one of those hard PPE plastic products. I make sure people recycle everything. I'm like, even the smallest little things, instead of throwing away these batteries, let's recycle them.
Christina, I think what this is just an incredible example of is really getting engaged in your community. And I know that when I was in college, that took me so far in my climate career before I even knew that it would. So definitely recommend that. But also like on another level, right? When your local city government, that's another really great way to get involved because you'll learn skills that other people may not have. It'll help you stand out and it'll showcase your passion. Plus, Christina, it sounds like you're going to be amazing in those roles. And I hope that you have all of the confidence because you are going to make a difference in your community and I'm really proud and excited. So thank you so much for sharing with us. I think, I think that's a great place to kind of maybe work to tie things up. If you guys do have any more questions, please definitely cut me off. feel free. But I love that. I love that example of just getting involved, getting to know the right people, and kind of building your experience. I did just want to give College of Climate a quick little plug, if you guys don't mind. Definitely, if you are, working to build up your resume and find a way to make yourself stand out, we are working on rolling out the next edition of our Launchpad program. We don't have any real major updates for you just yet, but I can direct you to our website. If you go to collegetoclimate.co/students, then you can register to apply to be a part of the wait list. And we'd love to have you if that would be helpful in your search and to help you kind of boost your resume. We're also working directly with universities. So if any of your career centers, if you feel like you've maybe had an experience that made you feel like they didn't necessarily know much about climate and opportunities in climate, that's what we're really dedicated to helping solve. So we'd love to get connected with your university to be able to deliver them all of the resources they could possibly need to support you and your peers on campus. So definitely reach out to us if that's of interest. We can give you all of the info you need to be able to make an intro. So yeah, I just wanted to give those opportunities for you all to engage with us a little bit more. And thank you all for being here. If you do have any more questions, definitely, like I said, let's stay on and chat more. But thank you all for being here, and thank you so much, Noah, for joining us and sharing your awesome insights, and to Lucas for organizing and helping to put this together. I appreciate you all.
Yeah, and before y'all leave, is everyone okay taking a quick screenshot? And I can send it on the Slack. You can post it on your LinkedIn's if you want. Just I want to get a picture of the people here. I'll do a count until 3. 1, 2, 3. I like the thumbs up, Anurag. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Have a great night, and keep in touch.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks all.
Thanks, Noah.